Hello, ladies and gents. Welcome to CG Reacts, and this is Russians flee Crimea as Ukraine takes revenge. This is my channel Business Basics. I'm guessing this is the event that was intensifying. Ukraine has suddenly started hitting back Russia with immense force, let's just say. I mean, they've been doing a lot of drones and certain tech that they've been making and using it in a warfare, I guess. Maybe that has given them the edge. I don't know. But yeah, when Russia launched the biggest attack in Ukraine yet, Ukraine did the same thing and blew up a lot of places in Moscow, where where the center is. Basically, Moscow is the center, right? So now Ukraine, they're fighting back in Ukraine, and there's many news popped up, not just this video, that said Crimea hit hard. And basically pro-Ukrainian type news. So if there is a smoke, there is a fire, let's just say. Why am I saying this? Because people always say oh, this is fake news. Oh, this is biased. All of them are biased. So there must be something to this. It's going to be interesting. Let's watch one.
For the first time in this entire war, two things are breaking inside Russia at the same time. One, the Russian army is getting pushed back on the front lines, and two, the Russian public is starting to turn against Putin himself. These two things have never happened at the same time, and the combination is causing panic inside the Kremlin that we have not seen in last 4 years of this special military operation.
The Russian military is losing ground and taking heavy losses.
Anti-war protesters marched in dozens of cities across Russia, chanting "No more war."
Vladimir Putin is preparing his military to retaliate against Ukraine for a drone strike.
Just a few days ago, Putin launched one of the biggest attacks of this entire war against the city of Kyiv. Over 50 locations were hit with 90 missiles and 600 drones. The Kremlin says it was a retaliation for a Ukrainian strike that took place a few days earlier. But this video is not actually
all of this. So 90 missiles and 600 drones is the biggest attack on Ukraine by Russia yet. While USA destroys thousands of locations using even more missiles and everything in literally the first day in attack against Iran. I mean, we just heard of thousands of targets destroyed in the first days. I'm yeah, I guess that makes sense. But no, look at this number. That isn't just something that makes sense. That's a big number.
About that Russian attack, because if we look at what Russia was actually targeting, what missiles they used, and the phone call that Putin made right after the attack, it becomes clear that this Russian attack wasn't about military strategy at all. It was a message, and it wasn't really a message for Ukraine. It was a message for the United States and Europe, two of Ukraine's biggest supporters. So in this video, I want to break down three things. One, Putin is panicking right now, so why exactly is he panicking? What's actually falling apart inside of Russia, and why he chose this specific moment and this specific missile to send this message to the West? Because you see, looking at all this will tell us exactly how Russia is planning to escalate this war next, and the warning that Putin is trying to send to rest of the world. So to understand why Putin is panicking right now, we have to start with what happened on May 21st, just a few days ago. Because for the first time ever in this war, Ukraine pulled off a strike that genuinely shook the Russian high command. And it wasn't where you would expect. This was not a strike that happened in Moscow. Ukraine sent a wave of drones deep into Luhansk, a region of Ukraine, eastern Ukraine, that Russia has controlled since 2014. The target was a college building, but this wasn't being used by college students. It was being used as a temporary headquarters for a Russian unit called Rubicon. And here's the thing about Rubicon. Rubicon is Russia's elite drone unit. They were the ones who pushed Ukrainian forces back out of Kursk counteroffensive back in 2024. They also worked alongside North Korean troops to do so in the Russian territory. And on top of that, they've been causing problems for Ukrainian forces on the front lines ever since they were created. All that to say is that these Rubicon guys, they are good. Maybe even really, really good. Which is exactly why Ukrainians have been hunting them for months, maybe even years.
But not good enough, I guess, since they got found out and Ukraine bombed them. Intelligence is not easy. I mean, I guess US must have had in it, I don't know, or some other European agency. But yeah, they found it where they are and bombed it.
years.
That's
Back
powerful.
in November of 2025, we covered a strike on what was supposed to be another Rubicon base. This strike, though, was bigger and much more shocking. According to Ukraine's intelligence agency, the SBU, they killed over 100 Rubicon personnel, hit an ammunition depot, took out an air defense system, destroyed a command post, and of course, damaged an oil refinery. It seems like every time Ukraine carries out an assault, a Russian oil refinery goes down. But here's where
What is this? Apocalypse? Look at that. Look at where the smoke is. Seriously. Look at it's like a tornado or something. That's a supercell and that's a tornado. No, it's a smoke. Look at the smoke rise and it just blocks the half of the sky.
like every time
Oh.
Ukraine carries out an assault, a
Yeah. If it would have been any bigger than this, it would have blocked the whole sky.
Russian oil refinery goes down.
Oh.
But here's where things get interesting. For Putin, this strike was definitely painful, but it also handed him something that he badly needed, a talking point, a topic that can be used to divert public's attention and maybe even the world's attention. You see, as I mentioned earlier, Rubicon was operating out of a college building. That's why after this attack, the Kremlin immediately started spinning this story as Ukrainians attacking college students. They even called an emergency UN Security Council meeting over this attack, and they called it a war crime and said that Ukraine needs to be held responsible. Now, of course, no one really took this meeting, but I do want to read you guys this Denmark response because this has to be one of the best things I have ever seen. Take a look. Denmark said, "If we were to apply the same logic behind Russia's call for today's meeting, we would need twice daily emergency Security Council meetings, including on weekends, to only scratch the surface of the terror, death, and destruction that Russia has inflicted across Ukraine." I'm pretty sure Putin did not like
I mean, at this point, all Ukraine has to do is, okay, that's not true. They were not college students. But you know what? Here's a photo of Ukraine. Look at all those buildings. Are we really talking here like how we hit civilian structures? Well, this is how the entire cities of Ukraine look. Show me a building that doesn't have a hole in it.
that comment. But anyways, coming back to this war crime narrative, this was never really the point that Kremlin was trying to make. The point was to give Putin cover for what he was about to do next. And to understand why he needed that cover so badly, you need to understand what's happening inside Russia over the last few weeks. You see, that Rubicon strike was bad, but it wasn't the worst news Putin has gotten recently. The worst news was coming from Russians themselves. For the first time in 4 years, Russians are now openly turning against Putin.
Oh, yeah, that's so true. Now he can just say, see, they're attacking our college student, so we have to fight back. We're fighting evil. They could say that. I get comments in my video. I don't cover that much Russia-Ukraine thing, but I get comments in my video that Putin is fighting Nazis and he's doing God's work and whatever. Like, I'm not even going to respond. Like, what do I say at this point? I mean, really? But yeah, I guess it's like just a fuel. Like, oh, see, Russian people, we need this. We're fighting back against evil. They just attack our college student.
And against this war that he started. Now, I'll be honest here before we get into all the data. I know Russian polling is not something you can trust. It's very, very openly rigged. Independent polls or even independent media just doesn't exist inside of Russia. Any media that was considered independent was quickly taken care of after the invasion began in 2020. So that's something we should keep in mind. But now that we know that the polls are rigged, here's the thing that's actually wild. Even these rigged polls are showing that Putin's approval ratings are going down. He's now less popular than he was a year ago, and he's now less popular than he was.
Then, look, I'm going to say this. If these polls are rigged, this would not have been the result, right? It would have been opposite result, because when the times are the worst, state media tries to fool people thinking things are even better, things are even more patriotic, not that Putin's polls are down, which makes me think that, oh, these polls are 100% rigged, might not be true. There is always both sides of the issues. It is true that Russia is an aggressor attacking Ukraine and Russia is getting a lot of damage. But it is also true that other side just point blank says Russia is just completely losing or Russia is completely rigged. That might not be true either. So if the poll is saying that Putin is losing, numbers and things, that means that this poll might not be as rigged as people think. Otherwise, this is not what it would have said, right? This would have been opposite to make sure that things stays calm.
was when this war started. So think about that. When even your own propaganda polls can't lift your numbers, something is definitely breaking inside the country. So let's
But
look
that's
at
not how it works. If it's controlled by Kremlin and Putin, all they have to do is just lie and put the numbers up, right? And that would have been like had the effect of calming people, because there are a lot of people like, if the news says it, it must be true, and there you go. That makes me think this is not as much as rigged as you would think.
who's actually doing the criticizing. Because as we have covered before, the criticism isn't coming from people you would expect. These are not dissidents or democracy lovers or pro-Western voices inside of Russia. All of those people were forced to leave. The criticism right now is actually coming from Russian military bloggers and of course Russian nationalists. These are the people who were all in this war when Putin started it. They supported the invasion of Ukraine. They wanted to make Ukraine a part of Russia. And now that the war is...
Again, man, Russia is a big country. Not all of them can leave. To think all the criticizers left is kind of stupid. A lot of them don't like what's happening, but they can't say much. A lot of them, just like any other country in the world, are just confused. They don't know what the hell's happening, and they read something and they believe it. That's where the propaganda shines. So if there is like friction there, these are the people who never liked the war and now seeing the heat getting up over and over again, and now it's finally had enough type of element. They are not some complete point blank Russian nationalists who just want to take over Ukraine and who believes the Ukrainians are Nazis or something. That's not the case, right? There are extremists there, sure, but not the whole population.
Isn't exactly going according to plan? Well, guess what? They're blaming Putin. Let me read you a couple of statements. Here's one coming from a Russian war blogger just talking about the situation and the mood inside of Russia. The population faced with a reality without internet access is quietly crumbling. This kitchen-level discontent is building up, and the enemy's hope is that it will eventually erupt and yield the result that they are so patiently waiting for in the West. Now, I'll give you guys that. That was a very diplomatic way of saying that people inside of Russia are not happy. But not everyone is this diplomatic. Take a look at this next statement. Again, this statement is from a Russian war blogger. Putin still hasn't addressed the Russian people today after the Ukrainian armed forces carried out the largest bombing since the Great Patriotic War II, targeting the country's capital, Moscow. The entire elite is pretending nothing has happened. Some are too afraid to leave their bunkers, and others don't want to draw attention to themselves during wartime by appearing in public. But maybe we should finally ask ourselves, why do we need a president who's afraid to be with his people during a war he himself initiated? Does he not know how to win it, how to end it, how to exit it? And is he just stalling for time in the hope that...
You just figured that shit out now? First damn day when this happened and they thought that they're going to win this war in a matter of days, when their tanks didn't even work. And I don't mean like their tanks blew up. I mean they didn't work. They break down in the middle of pathway. A lot of them. Implies that Putin and Kremlin didn't even know what was happening in their own military. They assumed all the equipment works. When the chain of command, I guess, didn't care, or sat in the corner, drank vodka and played video games or something, didn't maintain their tanks. And gave the false report to Putin, like, yeah, our tanks work, fine, trust me, bro. It didn't work. So no, from the first day, things haven't gone the way they wanted. Of course, he doesn't know how it's going to end. Everything's have been like winging it. Everybody knows this.
Everything will resolve itself. Is this how leaders and commanders behave? Do they hide in their bunkers when their capitals are being bombed? Or do they stand with their people in the most difficult moments? Putin is afraid and unwilling to risk himself.
What are you, high? Why do you think there are bunkers there? There was a news of Putin going to his own bunker, I guess, a year or two ago. And I'm like, wait a minute, he has his own bunker? And they're like, yeah, it's very luxurious, big bunker and all that. I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. Every major, even America, China, Russia have their own massive bunkers where like important government people, these are not monarchs or king, these are politicians elected by people apparently, but they are more important, so they have to go to these bunkers. Yeah, okay. Even movies have this. post-apocalyptic thing happen and president and all the senators survive. Oh, that's great.
Which is why he doesn't visit Belgorod, Kursk, Tuapse, or Crimea. Putin is too scared to appear on the Red Square after May 9th without security guarantees from Trump. So, if he's afraid of everything, maybe he should just step aside and let others take his place. Those who aren't afraid of bullets and historical challenges. Definitely a shocking statement. Something you would not have seen coming out of Russia just a few years ago. Now, I do want to make something else clear, because I know some of you guys are probably going down to the comments and about to complain. Of course, a statement like this doesn't mean that Putin is getting overthrown tomorrow. It also doesn't mean that there's a coup coming very soon. But then again, the Prigozhin coup did come out of nowhere, so you never know. But the chances...
Dude, that coup didn't even last a second. What coup? I think people are really forgetting the level of iron hand Putin has over his own command and his country. If there was a revolt, it would have happened by now. 4 or 5 years now. This thing has gone on. How many Russian civilians died? How many of them conscripted? What is the numbers in millions? Yeah, Putin has a strong grip. There is no coup.
of something like that happening right now are very, very low. Nonetheless, this is a pro-war nationalist, someone who supports this Ukrainian invasion. And this guy is now publicly questioning the war and Putin's leadership. Like I said, this is something you would not have imagined happening inside of Russia when this war began. That's definitely a big shift. And that shift is not happening in a vacuum. The Russian army is failing to protect Russians inside of the country, and it's also failing on the front lines. Let me show you what I mean. Take a look at this map. The big city you see here is Rostov-on-Don. It's one of the biggest logistical hubs that Russia has been using in this invasion. It's where supplies for the entire southern fronts get organized before they are shipped out by trucks. And the road that connects Rostov-on-Don to Crimea, that highway that you see hugging the Sea of Azov, well, that is the main supply line basically keeping Crimea alive. Unfortunately though, that supply line is getting very, very dangerous. Because over the last...
Now it's getting dangerous. It's one road. It should have always been dangerous. Why is it happening now? In warfare, if there is a one thing that holds everything together, usually that thing gets screwed. That's how warfare works. So this was inevitable.
2 weeks, Ukraine has turned that highway into a kill zone. Drones are hitting trucks on a daily basis. You can actually see what it looks like when you travel down this highway on the B-roll on your screen. Supply convoys are being hunted. And here's the most scary part about
There are civilian cars like, oh, I'm going to visit my family member and my relatives in Crimea or in Russia, and they're like driving and it's like boom, boom. Like, all right, I guess this happens now.
this campaign. It just started. Literally, Ukrainians just announced that this is something they started doing 2 weeks ago, and they plan on doubling down, maybe even tripling down. So take a look at this announcement from the head of the Ukraine.
By the way, there was a white truck there, a civilian truck, and the trucks that are being hit are like olive military color. Why is nobody in Russia thinking maybe we should disguise this as a military, civilian truck and not the truck in green, that they can tell this is a military truck?
Ministry of Defense. We are launching a logistical lockdown for the Russian army. We're scaling middle strike operations to systematically destroy enemies' logistics and supply lines, stripping them of their capacity to mount offensive actions. We have allotted $140 million for direct procurement by our most effective frontline units, while simultaneously launching large-scale competitive tenders. The enemy's rear is no longer a safe haven. We are seizing the initiative using technology and the cold math of war to paralyze their operations. Ukrainians have figured out what's hurting the Russians right now, and they're doubling down. And guess what? Even in this short period of time, this campaign is already having an impact on Crimea. We're seeing reports of fuel shortages happening all over the peninsula, and the thing is only spreading. Take a look. Fuel shortages are beginning in Sevastopol. This is the beginning of the consequences of enemy systematic strikes on oil refineries and tankers along the land corridor to Crimea. There's no point in asking questions to local authorities. Questions should be directed to Gerasimov, the head of the defense ministry in Russia. And here are the questions that these Russian bloggers are asking. Why was there sufficient protection not provided to strategically important industrial enterprises? And question 2, why is the...
I'm asking that. Where are your S-400s and S-500? Don't you have them? Why is those things are not protecting your own key industrial assets? To me, things like you just don't have enough resources and you just don't have enough defenses. That's it, point blank. You don't have the production capability right now. You don't have enough resources and money. You just don't have enough of your like SAMs, anti-air defenses, and that's what this is.
The land corridor in Crimea are not sufficiently secure. Unfortunately, the people who are supposed to be asking these questions do not have the will to do so. I'm guessing because they don't want to fall out of a window. That's why they're not going to question Putin and his little buddy Gerasimov. But anyways, this is the backdrop. This is the situation that Putin is dealing with. The army is getting pushed back on the front lines. The elite drone unit just lost 100 of its most experienced operators in one night. The main supply route to Crimea is on fire. And on top of that, Russian public and Russian war bloggers are now publicly calling on him to resign. In fact, even his own rigged polls are showing that people are turning against this war. That means that Putin is backed into a corner that he probably hasn't seen before. When a war criminal like Putin gets backed into a corner, he escalates the war. And this is exactly what he's doing right now. This brings us back to the attack that we talked about at the start of the video, that attack on Kyiv. Because now, the missile that he used in that attack starts to make a lot more sense. You see,
has he not been backed into a corner like this? I don't know. There was a time a year or so ago when Ukraine used trucks to launch a lot of drones into like Moscow and blew a lot of places in Moscow. That was big. But I guess resources wise, yeah, like they're hitting the supply chain. So like that hurts. But how much does that hurt? That's the question, right? Maybe it just hurts enough for Russia to think like enough is enough. Let's use everything we have. It might get much worse, is what I'm saying.
On May 3rd, just 2 days after this Rubicon strike that we talked about, Russia retaliated by hitting Kyiv with Orishnik ballistic missile. Now, as you guys have probably heard, this is a nuclear-capable hypersonic missile, specifically designed to carry a nuclear warhead. And here's what a lot of people forget, that a nuclear warhead doesn't need to be accurate because it does so much damage that it can vaporize basically everything in its radius. So it doesn't need to hit a specific building or a specific coordinate. But you see, when you use a missile like that, an Orishnik missile, without a nuclear warhead, you're essentially using a Ferrari to deliver DoorDash. That missile costs around $30 to $50 million per launch, possibly more. I don't exactly know Russian numbers. They're not transparent with their military spending. But nonetheless, Putin just used that missile to hit an empty garage. And I'm not even kidding about this. We actually have a video of a person who owned the garage, and he was very pissed that Putin is hitting an empty.
What you mean it hit a garage? It wouldn't just hit a garage, it would hit everything around it. The warhead must have been bigger. Even if it's not nuclear, which is not, the warhead would have substantial like output. This is like a big ballistic missile. It probably goes over like a hypersonic speed, like much higher. Not Mach 5, but 10, 15 plus. Right? That's why they probably used it, so nobody can intercept it. If you're going over 10, 15 Mach, it's very hard to intercept things, even if you have the best defenses in the world. That's why Russia probably used it. But the output must have been big, not just one garage. And yeah, things are not usually that accurate, but those are in matter of few feet, not an insanely long distance. So if it just missed completely, that means missile is not working the way it's supposed to. Right? Nuclear missiles doesn't mean that it can just hit anything. They're still going to make it somewhat accurate. By few feet, sure. Right? By few yards, sure. Not completely different like hit somebody's garage.
Empty garage using this expensive missile. Take a look.
An Oreshnik smashed into my garages. Vova Pukin, I'm showing you what you've wasted millions of dollars on. These right here are garages. This is a garage.
How did it just do that damage? It should have done much bigger damage. It's a big ballistic missile, right?
Cooperative. Imagine that. And look, in this garage, right in this very one, Uncle Sasha planned to knock back 50 grams. It was a strategic decision, but you bitch ruined it.
So the question is, why would...
Where is the leftover from the missile? The missile must have been huge. Wait a minute, I need to Google Orishnik. There you go. That's the size of it. It goes over Mach 10. That's the size of it. That's look at the structure in the. You see that structure green? That's a whole, like proper shed, big shed, much bigger than a garage, and look at its size of it. If this is gonna fall, it should do more damage. I'm guessing that they didn't use the warhead on it. They just used the missile body itself. If it's going Mark 10, it would have enough kinetic power to do an explosion without actually using a warhead. This is called high-speed collision in a astrophysicist talk. When an asteroid falls on the moon or something, it just creates a big explosion like it's a bomb, but it's not, because it has such a kinetic energy, such a high kinetic energy that that energy is higher than its molecular bond. So when it impacts, it explodes instantly. So they must have not used a warhead, because they probably didn't have a warhead for this, which is not nuclear. So they just used the body itself, figuring it would do enough damage. Otherwise, that should have been like complete blackened ground if it had explosive in it. But they just used the body itself without explosion. Same way how THAAD interceptors don't use explosive inside. It's just like body that just hits something, because it's so fast it creates an explosion.
Why would he do it? Why would he spend so much money just to destroy basically nothing? That's because, you see, the missile wasn't really retaliation, it was a message. It was a message for the United States and Europe. We know this because we know that within hours after that strike, the Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov picked up the phone and called US Secretary of State Marco Rubio. And he delivered a message that was pretty simple: get American diplomats out of Kyiv. Because attacks like these are gonna keep happening, and Russia is not gonna be careful about only hitting military targets. Even the Russian media is talking about this very publicly. Take a look.
Several of today's Russian papers publish yesterday's statement by the Russian Foreign Ministry. Here it is in the Russian government paper, Rossiyskaya Gazeta. It announces Moscow's intention to launch what it calls consistent and systematic strikes on enterprises of the Ukrainian defense industry in Kyiv, including specific facilities for the design, production, and programming of drones and their preparation for use. It adds that the strikes will also target decision-making centers and command posts.
I've said this for a while now. If you push somebody and if their back is against the wall, which Putin and Kremlin's is, things will heat up much intensely. And they're not going to try to sugarcoat it. They'll just point blank say, yeah, we're doing this now. You pushed us too far type of way. So they're saying we're going to attack drone centers and decision-making centers. But its implications that not all the targets might be like that, because sometimes we make mistakes. Sometimes missile doesn't fall where it's supposed to. So civilian structures will get attacked. That is what this message is. Remember during the Iran time, even one Tomahawk missile from US hit us, a school, in a base, because they had some bad intel or something. That's what people told me, that the bad intel. So there is very likely that it was a US missile. If US and their accuracy can have that effect, Russian accuracy is not going to be the same as American one. So it implies that, yeah, a lot of civilian structure will get hit now, and we won't be selective in that way. So things have amplified, is what I'm saying. Things will get much and much darker. Both sides push each other. One side is supposed like a superpower with a nuclear weapon. They have more opportunities and a more arsenal to choose to increase the heat. So things might get much worse.
And it calls on foreign nationals, including diplomats and staff of international organizations, to leave the city as soon as possible. Well, the head of the EU mission in Kyiv has already said the EU is not pulling out.
And this is exactly why Russia wants all diplomats and all foreigners to leave Kyiv, maybe even leave Ukraine altogether. Because for Putin, that would be a huge win. That's why he sent the same message to Europe that he sent to the United States. But unfortunately for little Vladimir, no one's actually taking him seriously. In fact, no one has announced that they're going to leave the country. And on top of that, we have European politicians.
Dude, it's not about taking seriously. He got on the box checked. I warned you, don't tell me now. Right? So you might hear a news of a US diplomat or European diplomat dying in a bombing, and Russia will just claim, we told you, you didn't leave. This is kind of scary. What is going to be your response if that happens? Because now you have to, somebody told me in the comments, the way US government and NATO works, that Congress words is like a law or something like that. So I don't know what's happening in that area. But if US is get attacked by Russia, will US enter? Will Congress, who are like a lot of anti-Russians, even if Putin's like, okay, let's calm down, let's not do drastic. No, even if Trump is like, let's not do something drastic, US Congress must still be like, yeah, no, enough, we are doing something. In the end, Congress holds a lot of power, even over president, right? President can do special operation and like walk away like that. Congress holds a lot of power because it's a democracy. Obviously, it's a republic, but that doesn't change that it's not it's a democracy.
Basically saying that, hey, if Russia hits us, we're going to assume that this was on purpose. Now, this is where I want to back up a little bit again and look at that attack, because it wasn't just a Rishnik that Putin used in that attack. He used 90 missiles and 600 drones to basically target a lot of civilian targets. And here's the list of stuff that was damaged. We know this from pictures that are also coming out of Ukraine. Putin attacked a national art museum, the Kyiv, and a museum that was dedicated to Chernobyl disaster. This all clearly shows that Russia wasn't just striking military positions, even though this is a special military operation. It was striking anything and everything that it could find. And unfortunately, Russia has an easier time striking civilian targets than military targets because, of course, military targets are protected. Now, Russia was hoping that this type of attack would convince foreign diplomats to leave Kyiv at least and
I don't know about protected,
maybe
man.
go to a western city and set up the embassy there. But unfortunately, everyone said no. And this is when we have the old...
I don't know about protected, man. You can't really protect against something like Mark 10 plus. I don't think Ukraine has that kind of a defense. I think Russia can't really target it right. Because targeting is not easy. I know people are like, oh, modern tech. Of course, you can target it. No, that's a flex that we can target. US has a flex that we have very insane accuracy. Not everyone can do that.
Drunk president of Russia getting mad publicly. Take a look at the statement he put out. The EU has said that it will maintain its diplomatic presence in Kyiv unchanged, despite Russia's warnings. Well, apparently they've got diplomats to spare and need to trim the headcount. Now, this guy has been bluffing all throughout this war, so I doubt Russia is going to start attacking diplomats. But nonetheless, just the fact that they're warning diplomats tells us a little bit about what Russia is really aiming for. And that just means that this war is going to escalate even further.
Some guy said something doesn't mean that's the doctrine now. That's what Putin is gonna do now. So I don't know about any of that. But yeah, what I do get is like Russia is getting desperate. They are gonna start attacking anything they can, even if it's not accurate and hit something else. I've said this in the past. Of course, it's gonna happen. So things might get worse. But the thing is, Ukraine can hit back Russia as well, which in itself is an insane thing. Ukraine never had that ability. If you told me in 2021 or 2020, Ukraine can do this, I'm like, what are you, high? Ukraine just came out of the blue with the help of US and other countries. But even then, they can coordinate. They can do all this. They can create their own drones and apparently drone carriers in the skies, turning a crop duster into some kind of a drone attack system. Ukrainians are doing insane things, man. That just came out of... I'm pretty sure even Putin is like, I was surprised. Because nobody saw this coming. Right, well, there you go. Russian flee Crimea as Ukraine takes revenge. Yeah, Crimea. We might see Crimea fall into Ukraine's hand again, right? I think we're forgetting. Look at the, like Korean War, how back and forth it went. And that was years. That wasn't some few days or something. That happened in years. So back and forth, back and forth. If you see that graph that's accelerated, it just go back and forth. So that might happen. Russia take Ukraine. Now what happened? Ukraine might take back Crimea, right? That's insane. All right, well, there you go. I guess I'll see you next time.